Hi, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to be focusing on one of the parts of the box model, which are borders. So in the previous video, I talked a little bit about some of the different layers of the box model and how they work. But in this video, we're actually going to be focusing on manipulating one of those layers, which is the border. And although it's not really the main part of the whole box model idea, it's still a pretty useful skill to know, and it really helps you understand how the box model comes together. Alright, let's get started. So for the next few videos, we're mainly going to be working with the images simply because they're just easier to manipulate and set the layout over something working with something like text or titles, things like that. So we're going to be working with our circular gradient here that we created in a previous video, as well as this custom image. So let's get started. So now there are many different styles that you can use to style the borders, but we're going to be using the main shorthand that allows us to style everything all at once. So the property is similar to our background property here. All you need to type is border. Whoops, we need to do on the image. So I'm going to go here on our radial gradient, and I'm going to start adding our border. So let's go ahead and get started. So what I'm going to do is just type border, and remember, every single element has a box around it, has this box model or invisible box. So it doesn't matter what you choose, you can always style these elements. It might look weird on some elements like this text here, but you can do it with everything. So there are three main parts to this element here. First is going to be the size, so we'll talk about that in a second. Then you're going to have the style, which is probably the main part. And then finally, you're going to have the color. So now that we have this, we can go ahead and start talking about this. So size is pretty similar to, changing the size of an image, for example. Yeah, it can be in pixels, or percent, or EM, it doesn't matter. I'm going to go with pixels for now. Now the usual range for a border is somewhere between 1 and 3 or 4 pixels, but you can go much thicker than that depending on what you need. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what 2 pixels looks like. So remember, separated by a space. Now we're going to go over the style. So there are many different styles that you can use on your borders, but there's 3 main ones that we're going to talk about, 4 main ones we're going to talk about: dotted, dashed, solid, and double. Now normally you're going to see solid. That's pretty much the most common one. I'll show you the other versions of this in just a second. So I'm going to go ahead and type solid. And now comes the color. So as we learned before, this can be a named color, this can be an RGB code, or even a hex code. I'm going to go ahead and just choose a darkish blue. I think that will fit in really well with the page. And in fact, you know what? Let's not use the color picker. Let's just use our RGB color skills and take the color of the background, which is here. So we're going to take those 4. And now I'm going to go back to our image here and paste it in. Oh, whoops. And now what I'm going to do is just darken everything. And if you remember, the darker it gets, the lower all of these values get. So I'm just going to lower them all by about 50. So here I'm just going to go 154. Now again, this doesn't have to be exact or anything. You can put really whatever you want here, but I'm just trying to darken everything. I'm just going to make this 200. So let's go ahead and refresh the page and see how our border looks now. Let's scroll down. So there's the problem. We actually forgot a semicolon here on the end of the background. So that's one thing you need to keep in mind. There we go. Now it's working. And you can see, and I did actually change the color there just to test it out. And you can see, there we go, we have our background. So obviously it's pretty obvious here with our bright red color there, but what I'm actually going to do is go ahead and just play around with some of these and see if we can change the features. So first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and change the height. So I'm going to go ahead and set it as 10 pixels, for example. And you can see that the size. And you can see that that gets a lot thicker. So you can change it depending on how you want your border to look like. So now let's go ahead and change the style. So let's go ahead and try out some of these other styles. So first I'm going to try dotted. So you can see now we have a dotted border. Now let's go ahead and try dashed. And you're kind of getting the idea of how this works. Let's see doubled, or double actually. I think that's probably the best other than solid. Yeah, you can see that looks pretty nice here. We have that double border. It's pretty useful in styling, but it's not really used very commonly. So the last thing I want to go ahead and change is the color. So I'm going to go ahead and just take a color from the color picker. I don't really feel like going through the whole RGB process again. Let's go ahead and just take this color. It's quite dark. Let's go ahead and refresh our page and see what it looks like. And now you can see the color has changed. So you can see that borders are not only useful for just changing the style of an image or a box or any box for that matter. They're also useful for showing how the box model works. So I'm going to go ahead and change this back to solid so you can get a better view. So if you remember in the last video, we talked about the different layers of the box model, and we remembered that the padding was used to separate or create spacing between the content and the border. In this case, you can see that the border and the content are directly touching, which means there is pretty much no padding at all because there's no spacing between them. On top of that, you can see that this border is also touching elements on the page or other elements on the page. So like for example, this table, there's a little bit of space between the header and the image, but that's due to other margins. We'll talk about that when we get later in this section. And so you can see that this doesn't have much margin either. So you can start to see here how this whole box model comes together and how you can see what's going on. So yeah, that's a pretty useful way to kind of look at the box model and see how everything comes together. In the next few videos, we're going to be looking at the other layers of the box model, and then we're going to bring it all together and start really changing up the way this website looks. All right, let's move on.